Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you. Lucinda struggled to open her eyes. Her whole body ached. The IV wires were sticking out of her arm and her mouth tasted of blood, and she was terribly thirsty. Every movement was difficult. The woman tried to remember the previous events. Here she and her husband were driving home from the anniversary of his business partner. He sat behind the wheel himself, although he drank a lot at the party. At first everything was fine. They were almost home. Then Lucinda remembered the headlights shining in her face, and then the impact. Someone had called the paramedics. It felt like the ambulance had come pretty quickly. They loaded her into the car. And what happened next the woman did not know, because after loading into the ambulance, she lost consciousness and woke up only now. A nurse entered the room and asked how the patient was feeling. "What about my husband?" Lucinda wheezed. "He's fine. He's not hurt. As far as I know, he's being questioned by the police." "Why?" "He swerved into oncoming traffic and his blood alcohol was tested. The car you collided with was unlucky. The impact threw it several meters to the side. The man behind the wheel is badly hurt and there's little chance of him surviving." "What's going to happen to my husband now?" "I don't know." The nurse shrugged indifferently. Lucinda was very frightened. It seemed to her that the nurse spoke to her with a kind of contempt. And she was not mistaken. Her husband's fault was likely to kill an innocent man, and her husband had not even scratched himself in the accident. Lucinda had asked him not to drive. She'd asked him to call a cab, but he hadn't agreed. And this is the result. Maybe it was for the best, Lucinda thought as she drifted off to sleep. Lucinda had met her husband about 5 years ago. She'd been working late that night. She had no money for a cab, so she decided to go to the bus stop and wait for the bus, which now ran at least half an hour apart. It was raining heavily outside, and Lucinda didn't have an umbrella with her. As she approached the bus stop, she noticed that the bus had just pulled away from her. "What bad luck," Lucinda muttered to herself. "Now I'll have to stand here for another half an hour getting wet." However, in 5 minutes, an expensive foreign car stopped right in front of Lucinda. The window on the passenger side opened, and a pleasant male voice said, "Young lady, do you need a ride?" No, Lucinda answered fearfully. "I'm waiting for the bus. Thank you. Don't be afraid." "I won't eat you," the man continued. "The weather's so nasty. And you're wearing such a thin jacket. Sit down." Lucinda thought the man didn't look like a maniac, although she didn't know much about cars. She realized that such a car was not cheap. Lucinda nodded her head and carefully placed herself in the passenger seat. The car started. "Where are you going?" the driver said. "I'm going to the 7th Street, the 85th house. There's a shopping center not far away." "Great, that's exactly where I need to go." They drove in silence for a while. Suddenly the man spoke. "My name's Liam. And you are?" "Lucinda," the woman said. "May I ask what such a young and beautiful girl was doing at the bus stop at such a late hour? Aren't you afraid to walk alone?" "I was coming from work," Lucinda answered briefly, not wanting to go into details. Liam had liked the woman at first sight, and he was the kind of man who always took what he wanted. Right now, he had decided that Lucinda was bound to be his. He parked the car at his destination. "How much do I owe you?" Lucinda asked. "I don't really have much money on me." "Lucinda, do I look like someone who needs money?" Liam asked with a chuckle. "No, but I'm used to having to pay for every job." "Then give me your phone number. I'll call you one of these days and invite you for a cup of coffee." Lucinda smiled slightly and dictated her number to the man, then said goodbye and got out of the car. Liam turned around with a satisfied look and went about his business. He had gotten what he wanted, as he always did, though. Lucinda's life went on from there. Liam didn't call her, and the woman decided he wouldn't. After all, why would someone like him want a simple simpleton like her? But on Friday, Lucinda got a message from an unknown number. Pick you up tomorrow at 5, 0 sharp. Be ready by then. Liam. I don't remember us switching to you, Lucinda sentenced aloud. Who the hell does he think he is? So he's rich. He thinks everyone should bow down to him now. Oh no, you can't do that to me. Despite her resentment, the woman decided to go to the cafe with Liam, but to tell him what she thought. Lucinda was ready on time, and at 5 o'clock she was standing at the entrance. I like punctual girls, the man said, instead of greeting her. Look, Liam, I don't think we've ever gotten off on the friendly foot. Just because you've helped me out once doesn't give you an excuse to talk to me like that. You've got a temper, Liam grinned, and I like that kind of girl. What do you think you're doing? Lucinda was indignant and tried to get out of the car. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just used to talking to people as equals. If that's the way you want it, you're welcome. I'll only call you you. Lucinda agreed with Liam, and he, in turn, realized that this girl was not as simple as she seemed. Liam was wooing Lucinda very nicely. At first the woman thought that he was just having a good time with her, and they could not have any serious relationship, but she still wanted to be close to him too. Everything was good and looked like a fairy tale. Lucinda decided that if Liam decided to break up with her, she would still remember those unforgettable impressions of a beautiful life. However, Liam's intentions turned out to be more than serious. After 6 months, he made Lucinda an offer, but the woman did not immediately agree to it, although she really wanted to. She tried for a long time to understand why a successful and wealthy man who could marry any beauty, in addition, with a rich dowry, need the most ordinary bride. But Liam stood his ground, and Lucinda finally agreed to become his wife. The wedding was a lavish affair that any woman would envy. A lot of guests, a huge choice of food and drinks, the bride's dress from a famous Italian designer. After the ceremony, Liam took Lucinda to Courchevel. She still could hardly believe in the reality of what was happening. But any fairy tale sooner or later ends. When the newlyweds returned home, Liam insisted on firing Lucinda from work. First it was just hints. Then they turned into requests and then into demands. Eventually, the woman gave in and quit her job. She should have noticed the change in her husband's attitude even then. But Lucinda liked her new, rich and beautiful life too much. She decided she could tolerate her husband's whims. But it only got worse from there. Liam began to control every step, checked the biography of all her friends. All the time called her and demanded a report on her movements. After a few months, Lucinda could not withstand such pressure and decided to talk to Liam. In the evening, when the man was working in his office, she cautiously entered his office and sat down in the chair opposite. "We need to have a serious talk with you," Lucinda began. "Lucinda, let's not do this now. I'm really busy." "No, Liam, it's urgent. I can't wait any longer, and I can't take this abuse." The man took his eyes off the papers and looked at his wife with interest. "What kind of abuse can't you take?" "Yours. You're always watching me. You don't let me socialize with anyone. I can't go for a normal walk without you yanking me every 5 minutes. I'm just looking out for your safety. Whoever wants to mess with me through you. I'd rather watch you now than deal with the consequences later." "Don't you get it?" Lucinda started screaming. "I'm a human being, not a doll. I'm your wife, not a slave." "Lucinda," Liam said with pressure, "stop your hysterics. You want a nice life, don't you? And that comes at a price. So please accept my rules and don't make any more scenes. If you're bored, invite your girlfriends over." "What girlfriends? After your tests, they all left. I don't have anyone to invite." "Get new ones." "That's a problem." "No, Liam. I can't go on like this. I'm leaving you." Lucinda got up from her chair and wanted to leave, but the man stopped her. "Sit back down," he said in a calm and frightening voice. "Then listen to me. I won't let you behave like this. No woman in the world dares to divorce me. If you even once again mention that you are going to leave, You will not be enough. Do you understand me? Lucinda looked at her husband in silence. For the first time in her life, she saw him like this, and it frightened her. Why don't you say something? Liam asked in the same voice. Answer me. I understand you, Lucinda whispered. Can I go now? Liam slowly approached his wife and offered his hand. Lucinda stood up from the chair, whereupon the man pulled her tightly against him. The woman's heart was beating at breakneck speed. Don't be afraid, Liam said as gently as possible. I love you very much, but I won't let you play with yourself. You're mine and mine alone. Don't make me remind you of that again. The man released his wife from his embrace and said, And now you can go. I still have work to do. Go to bed. I'll join you a little later. Lucinda, without saying a word, left the office and went up to the bedroom. How to go on living after all that she had heard. The woman had no idea at all. Since then, Lucinda's attitude toward her husband had changed a lot. She kept remembering his words and threats. Liam, on the contrary, behaved as if nothing had happened. He spoiled his wife with gifts, took her to luxurious restaurants, gave her huge bouquets of flowers every day. Lucinda completely confused. She did not know how to respond to all this now. After all, she is not a toy, but a living person. She cannot be treated like this. But she couldn't leave Liam yet. After all, the woman hadn't worked anywhere for months. Though she still had her premarital apartment, Lucinda had nothing else and could hardly find a good job quickly. And Liam would probably do his best to make sure no one would take her in. The woman would be left completely destitute. Therefore, Lucinda saw two ways out of the situation: to wait until Liam himself lost interest in her, or to accumulate a safety cushion, choose the right moment, and divorce her husband. Deciding that both options took time, she began to save money in secret from Liam. It certainly wouldn't go to waste, Lucinda thought. Time passed, but Liam didn't even think about leaving Lucinda. He loved her, led in his own way, with jealousy, constant control, but he still loved her. However, the man was having business problems. Competitors decided to buy out his firm on very unfavorable terms for him, and in case of refusal promised problems with suppliers and customers, which gradually and carried out. Liam had already lost 2 major clients, which could not but affect his income. He even had to fire some employees, including his driver, to save at least some money. But he was not going to give up his lifestyle completely. Lucinda decided that this situation could play to her advantage. But on the other hand, she could not leave her husband in such a difficult period of life. Liam, wanting to find a way out of his unpleasant situation, began to look for new connections, those who could help him. He managed to interest one influential man in the city, who later became his partner. Things began to slowly get better. Liam found a new client thanks to his partner, for which he was very grateful. One day, Liam received an invitation to the anniversary of his new partner. There were no reasons for refusal, and the man, together with Lucinda, went to the party. His driver, Liam, fired, even when there were financial difficulties, and a new one was never hired. Therefore, the man himself sat behind the wheel of his car. The holiday was held at the highest level. Liam managed to meet new useful people. The same could not be said for Lucinda. She was bored among these people, so she pretended to be sick and asked Liam to let her go home in a cab. But he decided to drive his wife home on his own, especially since he'd already made all the necessary acquaintances. Lucinda asked him not to get behind the wheel after so much alcohol. But the man did not listen to his wife, saying that he is no longer a boy and can make such decisions himself. In the end, all this led to the fact that Lucinda ended up with injuries in the hospital. In the next room, on the verge of life and death, lay a guy who drove into her husband, and Liam himself was questioned by the police. Lucinda woke up the next morning. A familiar nurse was fussing over her bed, doing something with her IV. When she noticed Lucinda was awake, she turned to her. "How are you feeling?" she asked in an indifferent voice. "I don't know," Lucinda replied, "probably like any other person after an accident." "The police want to talk to you. Will you be able to do that now?" "Yes, of course." Lucinda said confusedly. The nurse headed for the exit, but the woman stopped her. Wait a minute. How's the guy my husband and I crashed into feeling? I didn't think you'd be interested in that. Although you probably just want to know what kind of punishment to expect for your husband. He survived tonight, which is a good sign. His chances of living have improved considerably, although the consequences could be very unpleasant. His spine is damaged, and it's likely he'll never walk again. What a nightmare, Lucinda whispered. The nurse grinned wickedly and left the room. A few minutes later, a man in a police uniform came to Lucinda's room. Lucinda, he said. Yes, that's me. My name is Jacob. I want to ask you some questions about yesterday's incident. Do you mind? Of course, I'll answer all your questions. Thank you. We spoke to your husband yesterday, but for the sake of completeness, we need to hear your side of the story. Do you remember exactly how the collision occurred? Yeah. We were driving home from the suburbs. At some point, Liam jerked the car to the left, and we were apparently in the oncoming lane. Then the impact happened. That's all I can tell you. Tell me, do you have a driver's license? Do you know how to drive? No. Why do you ask? They're just standard questions. The cop lied. In fact, he needed to understand what Liam had said was true and what was fiction. Her husband had tried to set her up by saying that she had been driving that night, that a car had driven into them, and she had been trying to avoid a collision. But one thing he hadn't considered was that the police would be questioning his wife so soon. Liam thought he'd have time to tell her what to say and how to say it so no one would get in trouble. And what would happen to the injured guy? Liam didn't care at all. Lucinda, did your husband ever drink and drive? No. It was a one-time thing. He used to always have a driver, but now he had to sack him because of financial difficulties. So Liam drove himself. Thank you, Lucinda, for your answers. You've been very helpful. Tell me, Jacob, what's the threat to my husband? It depends on how the other party to the accident feels. But in any case, your husband will not be able to avoid criminal punishment because it was his fault that serious harm to health was caused. You can only use the services of a good lawyer. Perhaps he will help to reduce the term of punishment. Although it is unlikely that he will succeed. Why? Because the victim is the son of a deputy from a neighboring region. I think you understand that his father will do everything he can to maximize the punishment for the perpetrator. I understand. Thank you, Lucinda replied quietly. Policeman left the room. There was no doubt in his mind now that Liam had been driving the car. What a vile man. How can you shift your guilt onto another person? Especially a woman, Jacob quietly scolded his own wife. In his many years of service, he had never gotten used to human meanness and betrayal. Now he was ready to fight to make sure the man got what he deserved. The policeman dialed the number of his employee and told him to take Liam into custody, because yesterday, based on his testimony, the man was released on his own recognizance. Now he wouldn't be able to get out of this story so easily. Liam was working on his main problem when the doorbell rang. Who the hell is that? The man cursed. There was a police officer standing on the doorstep. Liam? Well, he replied dismissively, you need to come with us to the station. You're suspected of committing a road traffic accident causing grievous bodily harm to a third party. Why would I do that? I already told your superiors yesterday how it was. All questions to my wife, who was driving, but she's in no condition to answer your questions. We're the injured party. We were hit by a crazy guy in a six. Ask him. We've already taken your wife's statement. And that, as you put it, crazy man, now lies in intensive care, and it is not known whether he will live. And his father is unlikely to let you get away with it. Wait. Liam was indignant. When did my wife have time to talk to you? She's in the hospital and hasn't come to her senses yet, as far as I know. You're wrong. She's perfectly capable of talking and testifying. So you better watch your words. Otherwise your situation may be aggravated by perjury. Bitch, Liam swore irritably. Liam, let's not do this, politely asked one of the arresting police officers. Don't you tell me what to do. Okay, that's insulting an officer in the line of duty. Guys, let's cuff him and let's go. Liam tried to resist, but it was stupid, given his position and the strength of the police. Half an hour later, he was already being questioned by an investigator who informed him of his wife's statement and hinted at who the injured guy was. So the best thing the man could do now was to tell the truth and cooperate with the investigation. Liam had no choice but to comply, but he demanded a lawyer, refusing to speak without one. Thus began the investigation and trial. Meanwhile, Lucinda was on the mend. She was already able to walk around the hospital on her own. However, it was strange to her that her husband had not yet given any news about himself. The woman decided that he was just minding his own business, and now he was no longer interested in her. Lucinda was far from how cases were investigated, so she did not even suggest that Liam could be in the detention center. One day, she was walking down the corridor of the hospital and saw a young man being moved into one of the wards, followed by the policeman who had come to see her. Lucinda immediately realized that this was the victim Liam had driven his car into. Curiosity got the better of the woman, and she cautiously approached the room to overhear the conversation. "Kevin, the man responsible for the accident has been apprehended," said a voice that sounded familiar to Lucinda. "Your father will be here soon. He's already been informed that you've recovered." "Shit, that's the last thing I need is my father here. How am I going to explain all this to him? Kevin, you didn't have to do this. Steal someone else's car? Get behind the wheel without a license and go nowhere? Because my dad was a real pain in the ass. I wanted to get away from him. Do something on my own. Kevin, you're going to be handicapped for the rest of your life. Do you realize that?" Suddenly, Lucinda got a call from behind. "What are you doing here?" It was the nurse who was taking care of Lucinda. "You don't belong here. Or are you trying to bribe the victim? You're getting ready. What are you talking about?" The woman was indignant. "Why should I bribe him? I'm only interested in his condition. You're all the same. Damn rich people. First you make a mess of things and then you hide and think about who would bring money to whitewash yourselves. The guy's lucky to be alive, by the way. He'll probably be in a wheelchair from now on. And you and your husband will go on living in peace knowing no troubles." Lucinda silently looked at the nurse with surprised eyes. Now she understood why she had been so rude to her all this time. "Look, I don't want to bribe anyone. And I don't have the money myself. And I don't know what my husband's plans are. He hasn't even come to see me once in all this time. Maybe he's out of town." Jacob came out of the victim's room. "What's going on here?" he asked angrily. "Oh, it's you, Lucinda. I've been meaning to talk to you. Can we go to your room?" "Of course," Lucinda answered quietly. When they entered, the policeman closed the door behind him and told Lucinda about her husband's affairs. "The investigation has already proved his guilt. The case has been submitted to the court, and the hearing will take place next week. Liam has no chance of staying free, and the victim's father will do his best to make sure he gets as much time as possible." As it turned out, Liam drove into the car of an 18-year-old boy who stole or simply arranged to borrow a car from an acquaintance to escape from his parents. His father doesn't have that much influence in this town, but nevertheless, he has just as much money as Liam. Tears rolled down Lucinda's cheeks. She felt sorry for the injured boy. She was scared for Liam, even though she didn't love him anymore. He wasn't a stranger to her, and she was worried about him. And most importantly, it was not clear what she should do now, how to live with this burden. Lucinda woke up from an incomprehensible rumble. When she opened her eyes, she saw an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit and a robe thrown over his shoulders. "You're asleep, bitch. You murdered my son, and now you're just lying there. I'll make your life a living hell. You and your husband will go to hard labor for the rest of your life. Who are you and what do you want?" Lucinda asked fearfully, though she had already guessed who her visitor was. "I am your nightmare from now on and for the rest of your life." Lucinda sat up on the bed. Sleep finally receded, She looked at the man carefully. "Stop screaming. I can understand your condition and sincerely sympathize with you. But this grief does not give you any right to behave like this with a stranger, especially without knowing all the details of what happened. You talk to me here. I'm not going to leave you like this." I said it all. After that, the man turned around and left the room, slamming the door loudly. Lucinda remained sitting motionless. She could not even imagine what to expect from this man. After sitting like that for about half an hour, the woman decided to go check on Kevin, the guy who had been injured in the accident. She approached his room and knocked gently. No one answered. Then Lucinda opened the door. "May I come in?" the woman asked. There was still no answer. Then the woman entered the room. "Hi," Lucinda said. "Hello." "Who the hell are you?" Kevin asked back. "My name is Lucinda. I was a passenger in the car that hit you." "Wow. What did you want? Is this about my father? You think I sicked him on you? Well, you're wrong. I don't blame you for anything. Neither you nor your husband. It's my own fault. I shouldn't have started all this. I'd be at home now, warm, cozy, fed, and happy." "I'm really sorry about what happened. I know it sounds stupid, and it won't make things right. But I'm sorry." Kevin looked at Lucinda in surprise. "Forgive you for what? It's not like you had anything to do with it. You were a passenger, and I was hit by the driver. Your husband, I understand." "Yes, my husband. Only he's never gonna admit he's to blame in his life. He'll blame everyone around him but him. And I don't think he cares about anyone else but himself. Maybe now he'll realize something. You say that like you're glad he's in trouble." It was hard for Lucinda to admit it, but she did feel a certain amount of joy that Liam might get a real sentence. "Maybe you're right," Lucinda sighed. "That way I'd have at least a chance to get away and divorce him. Wasn't there any way to do it without that?" "Apparently not," the woman replied sadly. "He's terribly possessive. Next to him I felt like a prisoner, and I could not leave. He promised me such problems, no worse than your father. So my sacrifice wasn't in vain." Kim tried to smile. "Did my father threaten you?" "Yeah, he came by today, yelling, cursing. Never mind. I didn't come to you to complain or ask you to complain or ask you to save me from him. I'm an adult. I have to deal with my own problems. I'm sorry again." "I'm really sorry about what happened. You're a good person." "Thanks, Kevin. Where were you going in such a hurry? Would you mind telling me?" "I'll tell you. I wanted to start my own life. I guess, like you, I wanted to be free of my parents' custody. I was tired of being pushed around. Constant control. My father was always forcing me to study. He paid for me to go to law school. That's not my thing. I wanted to study music. I even had a band with some guys. But my parents made me give it all up, saying I wouldn't get anywhere with my music. So I decided to run away. I saved up some money, borrowed a friend's car, got in and drove off." Lucinda couldn't hold back her tears. She felt so sorry for this guy who had such grandiose dreams, such a will to achieve them, determination. And now, because of her husband, he lost everything. Now Kevin's whole life is about lying in bed. He's unlikely to have a wife and children. He won't be able to play his favorite guitar anymore. He's not even going to be the lawyer his parents wanted him to be. "Lucinda, don't cry. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just what someone upstairs wanted. And I'll talk to your father. I promise you, he won't hurt you." "Thank you, Kevin," Lucinda said gratefully. She went back to her room. The woman felt a little better. The next few days were completely uneventful. She socialized with Kevin. The guy turned out to be a very developed and interesting conversationalist. Lucinda was surprised that in her 32 years she could so easily and freely communicate with an 18-year-old guy. Kevin's father didn't show up again. He was too busy with Liam's lawsuit. Meanwhile, Lucinda was getting ready to be discharged with a lot of important things ahead of her. Lucinda couldn't leave the hospital without saying goodbye to Kevin. The evening before the day of discharge, she went to his room as usual. They talked a lot about life, their families, their dreams. "Kevin, what happened to your mom? Why did your dad come to see you alone and I never saw her?" "I don't have a mom," the kid simply answered. "What do you mean?" Lucinda was surprised. "It's like this. When I was 5 years old, she left my father for some richer man 20 years older than her. She hasn't even been interested in me or my life since. Dad, of course, didn't grieve about it for long. To everyone's misfortune, in 6 months he brought into the house a young, long-legged blonde and soon married her. Naturally, she doesn't want my father or me. She's interested in Daddy's money and connections, but apparently he's fine with that. That's why she's been living with us all these years. I can't say we have a warm relationship. It's more like neighbors." "What a hard fate you've had," Lucinda said sympathetically. "It's okay. I've accepted it. I guess it's more interesting than living on my own. At least I've seen something in my short life." "Don't say that. You've got so much more to see." "What's there to see when you're lying in bed?" "Kevin, I mean, we can try to do something. There are cases where people have recovered from injuries like this. And your father's got money. I think he'll spare no expense in your recovery." "Lucinda, do you believe that?" "I do," the woman answered firmly. "You believe it. Okay, thank you." "Kevin, I actually came to tell you that I'm being discharged tomorrow, and I won't be seeing you here anymore. And I don't know if I'll ever see you again. I want to get away from all of this. Divorce Liam, sell the apartment, buy a train ticket, and go somewhere where no one will find me. But I'm sorry to leave you. I've grown so attached to you these days. You're a very nice guy, really. But your father won't approve of us hanging out. I'll leave you my number anyway. If you want, you can call me any time of the day or night. I'll always be ready to listen to you." "I'm sorry to break up with you too," Kevin replied quietly, as if embarrassed. "If we had met under different circumstances, I would definitely have asked you to go out with me." Kevin lowered his eyes in embarrassment. He couldn't tell Lucinda directly how he felt for fear of being rejected. But during these days that they had known each other, the guy had fallen in love with her up to his ears. "Kevin, what are you talking about? And what does that have to do with anything? I'm 14 years older than you. We'd make a great couple. You're very nice and you're bound to meet a girl worthy of you in age. Appropriate. Why would you want a grown-up aunt with a lot of problems and a bad marriage?" Lucinda tried to joke. "You're not an aunt." Kevin was indignant. "I'm gonna go. It's getting late. Call me." Lucinda went back to her room. She lay down on the bed and thought about the words Kevin had said to her. She was worried that this nice guy was so attached to her and harbored false feeling. Lucinda realized the absurdity of the situation. "Okay," the woman said aloud. "I'll leave, he'll forget me, and everything will be fine. His father is a rich man with connections. He'll probably be able to help his son get back on his feet, and everything will be fine." The next day, Lucinda checked out and went home. The first thing she needed to do was to find out how Liam was doing. But how to do that, the woman didn't understand yet. She didn't have the contacts of the policeman who had come to see her, and she didn't know who else to call. Lucinda finally found the number of their district police officer on the internet, and after an hour of negotiating and calling various authorities, she was given the number of Jacob, who was handling the case. She dialed the number and heard a familiar voice. "Senior Lieutenant. Speaking. Hello. My name is Lucinda. You were in charge of my husband Liam's case." "Yeah. I understand what you wanted. I wanted to know how he was doing, how the trial ended. Maybe I'm in the wrong place, but I don't know who I can get information from. But he's my husband. I want to know how he's doing. He was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison with a fine." He was lucky that the victim survived and his father could not seriously influence the court's decision. If you want to meet him, come to the detention center. Jacob gave Lucinda the address and said goodbye. The woman wondered whether she should see her husband after all that had happened or whether she should run away. Lucinda was confused. On the one hand, she realized that the best thing to do was to run away now without saying anything to Liam. On the other hand, she felt sorry for her husband because they were close to him and had a family life, albeit not a long one. In the end, the woman decided that she should meet with Liam, if only to inform him of the divorce. Maybe the situation had taught him something, Lucinda reasoned. Maybe he'd learned that you can't be so stubborn and selfish. Then there's a chance for reconciliation in this family. Everyone deserves a second chance. With these thoughts, Lucinda changed her clothes, cleaned herself up, and went to the address. Once there, the woman saw a gray, gloomy building with bars on the windows behind a high fence with barbed wire. At the gate stood 2 sentries. Lucinda walked past them, feeling an inexplicable fear and panic inspired by the place. At the entrance, she was met by the officer on duty. "Hello, who are you here to see?" he asked. "Good afternoon. I was told I could meet my husband. He was recently convicted and brought to you. Your husband's name and surname?" "Liam," Lucinda replied, holding out her passport to the officer on duty. "Have a seat. I'll find out everything now." The officer on duty called someone on the phone, asked something, and after a couple of minutes he turned to Lucinda. "Follow me." He led the woman into a special room for dating. There was a table and 2 chairs opposite each other. "Have a seat. Your husband will be right with you." Lucinda sat down in one of the chairs. She noticed at once that it was terribly uncomfortable, apparently on purpose, so that people did not stay here for long. 5 minutes later, Liam entered the room. He looked wrinkled, his face covered in stubble, his hair disheveled, and there were bruises under his eyes, indicating that he'd had a lot of sleep. "Hi," Lucinda said quietly. "How are you?" "Don't you see?" Liam replied with a grin. "I'm resting here like a sanatorium." "Liam, don't be sarcastic. I don't want to hurt you." "Yeah," the man shouted indignantly. "And who told the cops that it was me who drove and hit that puppy and drunk? Wasn't it you, dear wife?" "What did I say wrong?" Lucinda was surprised. "They came and asked me how it was, so I told them. Didn't you think, with your empty head, that you should have asked me first what you could and couldn't say? I should have told them you were driving. We'd both be home right now, and we'd both be out of trouble. And you ratted me out, you bitch." "Liam, stop it. How dare you accuse me of something? I didn't put you behind the wheel like that. That poor guy was lucky to be alive. You ruined his life. I don't care about that guy. I care about my own life. And it's going downhill right now. So you listen to me. You're going to go home now. Find Jason's phone number in my address book. Call him and describe the situation. Then you're going to do whatever he says to get me out of here. You got it? Why didn't you call him yourself?" "I didn't have time. I didn't think it would happen so fast. Do you understand what you have to do? I'm asking you." "I'm not helping you, Liam. I don't know how I ever married such a monster. You don't see anyone but yourself. You don't need anyone. I'm filing for divorce and you can't stop me. Just try it. I'll pull you out of the ground. You'll owe me for the rest of your life for all the money I spent on you. And also..." Liam didn't get a chance to finish because a policeman came into the room. "Your date is over. Citizen out. You get up. Let's go back to your cell." "You know what I mean," Liam growled angrily. Lucinda quickly grabbed her bag and ran out of the building. She regretted that she had even decided to go to this meeting with her husband. What a tyrant he'd been. He was still a tyrant. Maybe even worse. Lucinda walked slowly toward the bus stop, thinking about what to do next. Lucinda's first order of business was to file for divorce from Liam. Now she had no doubt that this man would never change and living next to him would be hell. Lucinda didn't want to stay in his house either. So after packing her things and accumulated money, the woman left here for good, returning to her premarital apartment. Lucinda decided that the most correct course of action would be to file for divorce through the courts. She filed a statement of claim and waited for the result. She was immediately warned that such cases usually take 1 to 3 months. After that, Lucinda began to look for a buyer for her apartment. The woman wanted to get rid of everything that kept her here in this city to escape once and for all. So she asked the minimum price for her place, just to sell it faster. She was lucky. A young man named John was looking for a suitable apartment in the neighborhood to start a family. He was completely satisfied with Lucinda's price offer, and the apartment itself was a great option. All that was left was to wait for a reply from the bank, which had to approve John's mortgage. This also required about a month. The woman was lucky. The judge divorced her and Liam at the first meeting, which was held 3 weeks after the application was filed. Almost immediately after that, the bank approved John's mortgage, and he and Lucinda signed a contract of sale of the apartment. There was nothing to keep her here now. After gathering the most necessary things, Lucinda went to the train station. The woman decided that she wanted to start a new life with a clean slate, so she would not take a lot of things with her, because she had enough money to provide herself with everything she needed. Half an hour later, Lucinda stood in front of the ticket booths at the station and chose a direction. She knew for sure that she wouldn't go to a big city, but rather to a place where Liam wouldn't even think of looking for her, to some small, cozy town. Chicago was the choice. The train was leaving in 3 hours. After the choice was made and the tickets were in the woman's hands, Lucinda could relax a little. The woman deposited her suitcase in the luggage room and decided to take a little walk around the city to see it for what she thought would be the last time. There was a small park not far from the train station. Lucinda decided to go there. She bought a cup of ice cream and sat down on a bench. Suddenly her cell phone rang. The call was from an unknown number. The woman was afraid to answer it at first. 2 disturbing thoughts popped into her head at once. It was someone calling at Liam's request, who had heard about the divorce, or Kevin's father, whose threats Lucinda hadn't forgotten about, even though he hadn't shown himself all this time. Lucinda gingerly pressed the answer button. "Hello," the woman said in a shaky voice. "Hi, it's me. Recognize me?" "Kevin," Lucinda clarified and exhaled with relief. "Yeah, I thought you said I could call you about anything." "Of course you can. I thought you'd call a lot sooner." I'm sorry. I didn't have time. I was raising my dad." The guy laughed. "I'm glad you're in a good mood. How are you?" "I'm finally being discharged from that awful hospital." "That's great news, Kevin. I'm happy for you." "They also said I have a chance at recovery. But I have to fly to Germany for that, so I'm flying out tomorrow." "That's great, Kevin. I told you there was more to come." "Yeah. How's it going with you? Divorced your husband?" "Divorced," Lucinda sighed. "I sold my apartment and now I'm sitting by the train station waiting for my train." "How far are you going?" "Yeah, not far. Chicago." "Wow. Why did you choose this village to live in?" "Don't be like that, Kevin. It's a nice town. On the Michigan shore, nice and green. I've always wanted to live by the lake. And here I don't have to be afraid of Liam. I don't think he'd think to look for me there." "Good then. It's always nice when dreams come true. Are you going to invite me to the housewarming party?" "I will. I just need to buy a place to live, get a job, and do all the things that life in a new place requires." "Well, I can't really go right now either. You know, it's a long way to Germany, and it's going to take a while to recover, so don't expect it before 6 months." "That's a deal. Good luck, Kevin." "Thanks, Lucinda." "You too." After talking to Kevin, the woman felt a little calmer. She believed that the operation would help him get back on his feet and he would be able to live full life. Lucinda herself had a new life ahead of her, where there would be no more room for people like her husband. Lucinda stepped off the train, the bright summer sun hitting her eyes. The woman looked around. Everything was strange and unfamiliar. While Lucinda was on the road, she thought about how to get settled in her new place. The woman managed to look at several advertisements for apartments. Her money was enough to buy a one-bedroom and still have some money left for living. Lucinda decided to rent a bed in a hostel while she searched for a suitable option. Of course, she could afford a good hotel room, but Lucinda decided that it would be best to save as much money as possible and not spend it on any excesses. There was no telling how the job situation would turn out or how long it would take to find a place to stay. To her surprise, the room was very clean and spacious. There were not many guests, so Lucinda's neighbors were only 2 female students traveling around the city. Lucinda did not dare to deal with the purchase of the apartment herself, so she turned to a real estate agency. She described her wishes and waited for a suitable option. In the end, 3 days later, the realtor called Lucinda and offered several apartments that were for sale almost in the center of the city at a very attractive price. The woman decided to look at each of them. The first apartment was in an old house on the first floor. According to the seller, this apartment was inherited by his grandmother about a year ago. This immediately scared Lucinda away. She did not want to live in an apartment where someone had recently died. The second apartment was in a newer building with a good repair. But even there she felt uncomfortable, though she couldn't explain why. The last option was located on the 8th floor of a 9-story building. It had a beautiful view of the Volga. Lucinda immediately fell in love with this apartment. Despite the fact that it was a little smaller than the previous options, she felt at home in it. Everything was good here. A beautiful view from the window, a convenient layout, modern repairs. Lucinda decided that it was possible to stop at this option. The realtor promised to prepare a sales contract, and the next week Lucinda would be able to move into her new apartment. All this time, Lucinda corresponded with Kevin. He told her about Germany, how nice and beautiful it was. Even from the window of the hospital where he was lying, he had a beautiful view of the architecture of the city. They were preparing him for surgery, collecting all the necessary tests. In turn, Lucinda shared with him her impressions of her new place of residence. She bragged about her future apartment as well. Kevin praised her choice and promised to come and visit her immediately after her return to Russia. The deal to buy the apartment was successful. Gradually, Lucinda bought everything she needed for her new home. Now it was possible to look for a job. The difficulty was that Lucinda had not worked for a long time, so all her previous work experience was not so important to employers. The woman went on interviews, but there were no results. She was either offered too small a salary with irregular working hours, or promised to call back, and that was the end of it. After 2 months, she was lucky. A large company from another city was opening a branch in Chicago and was recruiting new employees for the team. Lucinda responded to one of these vacancies, and after an interview, she was offered a good position with a decent salary. So went the usual work routine. Meanwhile, Kevin underwent surgery. It was a success. Now the guy was engaged in recovery procedures. He could already sit freely and tried to stand on his feet. There was no talk of full-fledged movement yet, but doctors gave positive forecasts, promising that in 6 months Kevin would be able to walk without assistance. His father did not spare any money for his son's recovery, and it was paying off. Time flew by very quickly. Lucinda settled into her new place. She liked her new life. The woman had new interesting acquaintances, even began to improve her personal life. One evening after work, she went to her favorite pastry shop. Lucinda wanted to take her favorite cake to celebrate the successful completion of a project at work. But it was the last one, and some man asked him to give up this cake for his favorite daughter, who won a sports competition today and wants this cake as a present. Lucinda couldn't help but give in to the child, and the man, a little embarrassed, asked about Lucinda's plans for the evening. They struck up a conversation. The man's name was Steve. It turned out that he was raising his daughter all alone, his wife having died in a plane crash a few years ago. He ended up inviting Lucinda to join them for a celebration. It was a completely unexpected offer for the woman, but she accepted. She didn't realize how she had agreed so quickly. But there must have been something about this man that was so appealing and special. It was the beginning of their relationship. Steve's daughter also quickly became friends with Lucinda. She was already old enough to realize that Daddy could not live all his life alone with memories of his mother. Therefore, the girl did not interfere with their relationship. It seemed that life got better, and now Lucinda has a calm and bright future ahead of her. But not always in life everything happens exactly as it is desired. Liam was not released until the winter of the following year. The weather outside was gray and snowless. The man shivered. He hadn't been able to get out of prison early, no matter how hard he tried. Kevin's father had done a good job of keeping Liam there for his entire sentence. During the time the man spent incarcerated, many changes took place. The partner he had made a deal with before going to prison turned out to be a corrupt man and canceled all contracts at the first opportunity. And he did it in such a way that Liam was left not just without money, but he was a lot of debts from third-party organizations. In order to cover everything, the man had to sell his house, car, and other property. The money was barely enough. After that, Liam was left literally on the street. All former friends turned away from him because no one wanted to have problems with the law. Liam had nowhere to go. In all his troubles, of course, he blamed Lucinda. After all, in the man's opinion, everything happened because of her. If she hadn't been such a fool then, they'd both be sitting on the ocean somewhere now, enjoying their paradisiacal life. Liam couldn't accept that, so he decided to visit his ex-wife. He figured she couldn't have traveled far and was now living in her old apartment, without difficulty remembering the address. The man went there, but he was not opened. A woman shouted through the door that she was not Lucinda and did not live there. Liam knocked for a long time, demanding to be let in, but to no avail. After a while, the police arrived with the man. Together, they managed to take Liam to the street, where he told them that his ex-wife lived in the apartment, who had now disappeared and had not given any news about her. Nevertheless, the police had to take the man to the station and make a report on the offense. At the station, Liam once again talked about his problem. He even had the idea of filing a missing persons report for his wife, but he was rebuffed in return, as Lucinda is nobody to him at the moment, and it is quite possible that she deliberately made sure that Liam would not find her. Liam's behavior, given that he was only recently released from prison, did not go unpunished. He was given a 5-day jail sentence. At first they wanted to give him the full sentence, but they decided that the man was having too much trouble as it was. During the time Liam spent in the cell, he figured out a way to find Lucinda. Since he couldn't find her in a good way, the man decided to file a report that his ex-wife had run away, taking with her a rather serious amount of money from the safe, and the evidence was not his concern. Even if he failed to accuse Lucinda of theft, he would still know where she was, and he could take revenge on her for all his troubles. So Liam did just that. When he was released once again, he first filed a report on the disappearance of a large sum of money and said that no one but his ex-wife could have taken it. The report was accepted and an investigation began. After that, Liam's main problem was the lack of housing. Of course, he had gotten used to inconveniences for the last year and a half, but he could not live on the street in winter or wander around train stations. He had to get a job as a janitor because he could not get any other job with such a past. The pay was pennies, but it was stable. He was also given a small van to live in. Liam was willing to put up with the inconvenience, knowing that the time would come and his ex-wife would be held accountable. In the meantime, the police had begun processing Liam's application. Coincidentally, his case had fallen to the very officer who had once put the man behind bars. Jacob was immediately drawn to the familiar combination of surnames and first names of the defendants, but he couldn't remember them. Too many people he'd had to deal with, and it was impossible to remember each one. Lucinda stood at the airport waiting for her guest. Kevin had called her the night before and told her that he had recently returned from Germany and was eager to meet her. The woman immediately invited him to her house because she had long ago promised to invite him to her housewarming party. The airplane arrived on schedule. Lucinda was very worried, although she herself did not understand why. Over the years, she had developed a warm relationship with this guy. They corresponded a lot, shared their successes and failures. Lucinda knew how Kevin's rehabilitation was progressing, and he in turn knew about the woman's successes at work. Lucinda preferred not to tell her boyfriend about her personal life. She remembered that long ago when they first met, Kevin had made it clear that he liked her. Lucinda realized that those feelings had probably disappeared, but she was still afraid of hurting him. Because Kevin had already had a difficult time in his life. Finally, Lucinda saw a familiar face among the crowd of passengers. She waved to the guy. Kevin saw her and approached the woman with a confident gait. She hugged him and gave him a friendly kiss on the cheek. "Wow," Lucinda marveled. "You're walking so well already." "I've been working very hard to recover, and it's all thanks to you." "Why thanks to me?" the woman asked in surprise. "Who told me that everything would be all right and life would return to normal?" Kevin laughed. "I'm glad I was able to help you overcome these difficulties. Come on, I'll show you my apartment and then the city." They got into Lucinda's car, which she had recently bought on credit. "Wow," Kevin marveled. "You've already learned to drive." "I have. I have to travel a lot for work, and public transportation is not the most convenient option." "And now, how did you manage to get away from work?" "I mean, it's the middle of the day, right? You won't have any problems because of me." "I took a few days vacation, so I'm completely at your disposal," Lucinda smiled. They reached the apartment. Kevin immediately appreciated the accommodations. She had furnished it very nicely, and there was nothing superfluous. The woman fed her guests lunch, after which they went for a walk around the city. Lucinda took Kevin to her favorite places, told him some stories about the city which she had learned during her stay in Chicago. After a long walk, the woman suggested her guests to go to a cafe and celebrate their meeting. Kevin gladly agreed. He was tired and hungry during the walk, and he needed an excuse to confess something to Lucinda. As they sat at a table in a cozy cafe, Lucinda told Kevin that she wanted him to meet someone. She had invited Steve and his daughter to this evening so that they could all spend time together. "I thought it would be just the two of us," Kevin said with ill-concealed disappointment. "I think you'll like my friends." Lucinda glanced at the man and the girl who had entered the cafe. As Steve and Nancy approached the table, Lucinda introduced them to each other. "Meet my very good friend, comrade, and just a wonderful guy, Kevin. And this is my future husband, Steve, and his daughter, Xenia." "What husband?" Kevin was outraged. "Lucinda, how could you do this to me?" "Kevin, wait. How could I do this to you? I spent so much time living my life to be with you. I knew you needed a real man, and that's the only reason I tried to be a normal person like I was before. And you betrayed me. Why didn't you tell me you had someone else? Why didn't you tell me you didn't need me? Why did you spend so much time giving me hope that we could be together?" "Kevin," Lucinda said quietly, "what are you talking about? I told you right away that there was no way we could be a couple. There's a huge age difference. I thought you'd realize that, and in 2 years all your feelings for me had turned into mere friendship. I've always thought of you as my friend and nothing more. You're a very nice, kind, and smart guy. And you need a young girl suitable for your age, not me. With a lot of problems and a terrible past behind me, it's up to me to decide who I want and who I don't." Kevin jumped up from the table and ran away. Lucinda wanted to rush after him, but Steve stopped her, saying that now she could only make things worse, and the guy just needed to cool down. So he decided to catch up with Kevin himself and talk to him man to man. Steve ran out of the cafe and looked around. Kevin was nowhere to be seen. It was getting dusk outside, so visibility was somewhat limited. "Excuse me, did you see where the guy who ran out of here a minute ago went?" Steve turned to the man smoking near the cafe entrance. "That way." The man pointed toward the waterfront. Steve ran off to Kevin. The man figured the guy couldn't have gotten far, since it had only been a couple minutes, and so it turned out. When Steve found himself on the waterfront, he saw a lone figure standing on the Michigan shore, staring off into the distance. "Kevin!" Steve called out to him cautiously. What do you want from me? The boy said angrily. I wanted to talk. About what? You've already done everything you can. All I've lived for the last few years was the dream that Lucinda would see me, realize how hard I'd worked for her, and be with me. Turns out she never even thought of me as a man who could be her husband. Listen, boy, Steve said calmly. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Lucinda told me about you and your rehabilitation. You did good. You fought hard. But what's that got to do with her? There's too much age difference between you two. You're young, you're hot, blooded, adventurous, and unexplored, and she's got a lot going on in her life. She wants a quiet life. And what makes you think I can't give her that quiet life? Kevin asked in a calmer voice. Because I was a young guy in my 20s, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to want to try everything. I even understand your attraction to an older woman, but it'll pass quickly. Trust my experience. I want to live my experience, Kevin snapped at me. You shouldn't say that. Lucinda is very nice to you. She's always spoken very warmly of you. But she sees you more as a friend, in some ways, even as a son. So she can't share your feelings for her. What am I supposed to do now? I flew all the way out here to propose, even bought a ring. I wanted to stay here with her, but now I see that I'm not here anymore. Where am I supposed to go? Kevin, you need to talk to Lucinda. You two need to work this out together. It'll make you and her feel better. I can't see her. She betrayed me, and you think you're worthy of a grown woman. You sound like a teenager in transition. My advice to you is to find the courage to talk to Lucinda. She's very worried about you. And you know what? If she wants to stay with you after that conversation, I'll back off and stay out of your way. But you have to talk to her yourself. I will. Can you call her? My phone's at the cafe. I don't want to go back there. I'll wait for her at the apartment. I want to talk to her no problem. Do you need a ride? No need. It's not that far, is it? If I remember correctly, it's about a 15-minute walk. Thank you. After this conversation, Kevin went to Lucinda's house and Steve went back to the cafe. On the way, he called Lucinda and relayed the gist of the conversation. The woman replied that she would go home so that Kevin wouldn't arrive before her and wait under the door. Little wonder what might happen to him in a strange town. She offered to take Nancy with her, but Steve said to let his daughter stay at the cafe and wait for him. After all, Lucinda needed to talk to Kevin without strangers. The woman quickly got into her car and was home in 5 minutes. Kevin wasn't there yet. He didn't show up after 10 minutes or 20. Lucinda got worried and started calling Steve to find out what road the guy took and where to look for him. Steve, how did he go? Through town or along the waterfront? I think it was the waterfront. Okay, Lucinda, don't panic. Maybe he just got a little lost. You've given him the address. If he thinks of asking people, it's not too late. They should be able to help him. If he doesn't show up in half an hour, we'll go looking for him. Steve, I can't just sit here and wait. It's winter outside. Then the doorbell rang. Lucinda asked Steve to stay on until she checked to see who was there. The woman looked through the peephole and Kevin was standing outside the door. Steve, he's here, the woman said as she opened the door locks. It's okay. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your help, thanked Lucinda and passed out. When she finally opened the door, the pungent odor of alcohol hit her nose. Kevin, exclaimed the woman. Where have you been? What happened? The guy didn't answer anything. He stepped over the threshold of the house, slammed the door, and passionately kissed Lucinda right on the lips. It seemed like an eternity to Lucinda before Kevin pulled away from her lips. What are you doing? Lucinda was outraged, pushing the boy away from her. I love you. Don't you understand that? I want you all to myself. Lucinda, 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 I'm going to make you the happiest woman on the planet. I've spent so long planning to meet you, to impress you with how I overcame all the odds, how I learned to walk again, and it's all for you. Why don't you want to give yourself to me? What are you afraid of? I can see that you care about me too. Stop it, Kevin. Stop it. You're in no condition to be discussing this right now. Lucinda was shaking with fear, afraid that Kevin might do something stupid that he would regret. Lucinda tried to speak as softly as possible. And tomorrow morning you'll wake up and we'll talk about it. No. I want you to give me an answer right here, right now. Okay, fine. Let's just move to the room and talk about it there anyway. Okay, Kevin reluctantly agreed. That's good. Go sit down and I'll go make us some coffee. You'll be fine. Kevin waved his hand and walked back into the apartment, and Lucinda gave a faint sigh of relief. She still had her cell phone in her hand. Going into the kitchen, the woman quickly typed a message to Steve. Come to my place right away. It didn't take long for a reply. Lucinda quickly ran her eyes over the text. On my way out. I'll be there in 20 minutes. What's wrong? The woman decided not to reply to the message. She busied herself with making coffee. There was no telling what else might cross Kevin's mind. 10 minutes later, Lucinda cautiously exited the kitchen and walked quietly into the room. Kevin was sleeping peacefully, stretched out on the couch. The woman also quietly walked back into the kitchen. Now she could answer Steve quietly. It's okay. I'll tell you when you get here. Just don't ring the bell. After another 10 minutes, there was a gentle knock on the door. It was Steve. He looked worried. Lucinda quietly opened the door and escorted the man into the kitchen, where she told him what had happened. Did he hurt you? The man asked angrily. No, he didn't. It's okay. I told you. He just wanted to tell me how he felt and he kissed me. That's all he did. Lucinda, don't cover for him. I can understand that. I can even accept your friendship. But I don't want you to be miserable because of him. Steve, really, it's okay. Can you stay with me tonight? Yeah, I'll just call Nancy now and let her know. Lucinda set up the cot she'd prepared especially for Kevin's arrival, and she and Steve went to bed. The man woke up early in the morning when everyone else was still asleep. He carefully got up from his bunk so as not to wake Lucinda and made his way to the bathroom. When he returned to the kitchen, the woman was already preparing breakfast. He gently hugged her from behind and kissed her cheek. I can't wait for mornings like this to become a regular occurrence, Steve said with a smile. Me too, Lucinda said, although I rather sleep in a regular bed. They ate breakfast and Steve left for work. Are you sure you can manage without me? Steve asked anxiously. Should I stay up late and wait for Kevin to wake up? No, that's okay. He won't hurt me, especially sober. We should talk to him alone after all. All right, fine. Call me if you need anything. Steve left for work and Lucinda waited for her guest to wake up. Kevin didn't wake up until 11 o'clock. His head hurt terribly and his mouth was all dry. He got up and walked unsteadily to the kitchen where Lucinda was sitting and thinking about something. Hi, Kevin said quietly. Lucinda flinched in surprise and looked at him. Hello, she said sternly. Lucinda, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. Don't, Kevin. I understand perfectly well. Let's just please close the subject once and for all. Sit down, I'll pour you some coffee. Kevin obediently sat down in the chair, and Lucinda continued. I want to explain to you once again that you are dear to me as a friend. I am worried about you, and always have been. Probably because I feel guilty about what happened to you, but I never considered you as my life partner. You're very young, and you have your whole life ahead of you. You can finally realize your dream, become a musician, travel the world. But for that, you need another young and ambitious companion. I'm not cut out for that. I'd like you to stay in my life, but if you can't change your attitude towards me, then we'd better forget about each other once and for all. It's best for everyone. I hear you, Kevin said after a short pause. Maybe we really should stop talking for a while. I'll leave tonight, and I won't bother you again, at least not for a while. Kevin drank his coffee, packed his things, and headed for the airport. Lucinda offered him a ride, but he turned out. I'm sorry for everything. Be happy, said Kevin to Lucinda one last time. They hugged, and the guy left her apartment, and Lucinda was left alone with her thoughts. She was sorry to break up their peculiar friendship with Kevin, but it was the right thing to do, at least for now. Lucinda had pretty much calmed down by now after the story with Kevin. At first she had been worried about what had happened, blaming herself for not being able to recognize the guy's feelings for her, and for not explaining the impossibility of a love affair between them very clearly. Then Lucinda was angry at Kevin for not wanting to understand the simple truth that, in a woman's opinion, a difference of 14 years between a man and a woman is not acceptable for a happy marriage, especially if the woman is older. And now Lucinda had calmed down. She no longer blamed herself or Kevin. Everything had been resolved more or less well, so it was not worth dwelling on it, Lucinda decided. During this period, the woman often met with Steve, who was always trying to distract her from sad thoughts. This also played a part. And everything seemed to be back to normal. But suddenly there was a new problem. One afternoon, when Lucinda was working on a project, a call from an unknown number popped up on her cell phone. Lucinda didn't see anything suspicious about it. She often received calls from customers and colleagues from other branches, so the woman calmly answered the call. "Lucinda," the caller clarified. "Yes, it's me. It's Senior Lieutenant Chisholm from Police Station 4. Could you come down here today?" "What's the matter?" Lucinda asked anxiously. "You are a person of interest in a case. We need your testimony." "What case?" "Lucinda, I can't tell you everything over the phone right now. Come down to the station and we'll talk about it." "Okay." Cell phone rings. "I'll be there. What time can I do it?" 3:05. 0 in room 102. "Okay, I'll be there." "Thank you, Lucinda. We'll be waiting for you." Lucinda disconnected the call and began to wonder what this case could be and why the police were suddenly interested in her. The firm's affairs were clean. She was sure of that. She had done nothing illegal. After a while, an unpleasant conjecture visited her thoughts. She thought that it was her ex-husband who decided to challenge his imprisonment and pin all the blame on her. It was not for nothing that he had threatened her then, and according to the time limit, he was about to be released from prison. Lucinda did not say at work that she was summoned to the police. She just pretended that as usual she went on company business. On the way to the police station, she called Steve and told him about today's call and her suspicions. The man asked her to keep him informed about everything that was going on, and most importantly, not to panic early. The woman easily found the right office and knocked on the door. "Come in," she heard from behind the door. "Hello? I got a call today asking me to come in on a case." "Lucinda?" said the owner of the office. "Yes," Lucinda answered briefly. "Please have a seat. I'm the one who called you. My name is Tony." Lucinda carefully sat down on the chair opposite the policeman and looked at him with a questioning look. "Tell me, please, how long have you lived in Chicago?" The officer began his interrogation. "About 2 years. Wait a minute. Maybe I should get a lawyer. I don't want any trouble and I don't want you to accuse me of anything when I can't defend myself." Lucinda chose a defensive position. "Lucinda, you can certainly have a lawyer. But I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just getting some details." Lucinda did not answer anything. She silently looked at her interlocutor. "Can we continue?" he clarified. "Yeah. But if I don't like something, I can refuse to answer your questions." "Of course you can. But I strongly advise you to tell me the truth. It's in your own interest." "All right, I understand. Let's continue. Where do you live?" "In my apartment, which I bought when I got to Chicago." "And how did you buy the apartment?" "I sold my apartment in another city and used the money to buy a place here." "Can you document that?" "Of course. My documents are in order, but I don't carry them with me, so I keep them at home." "And your car was purchased with what funds?" "It was bought on credit. I have the paperwork to prove it too, and I have it at home." "Lucinda, please don't take this personally. I'm not going to accuse you of anything. I'm just trying to get the whole picture. Then maybe you can tell me what's going on and what happened." "Tell me, do you know Liam?" Lucinda flinched at the name of her ex-husband. She knew it was him, but she didn't know what he was up to yet. "It's my ex-husband," Lucinda replied in a trembling voice. "The thing is, a few days ago we received a request from your hometown. Liam claims that a large sum of money has gone missing from his safe, and he named you as the only suspect since no one else was in his house during his absence." "But that's nonsense," Lucinda said indignantly. "I ran away from this house as soon as he was put in jail. I hardly even took my things." "Lucinda, please calm down. We're gonna figure this out. You're not facing any charges yet." To be honest, he couldn't provide any evidence that anyone else was in the house or that the money was stolen at all. It's all in his own words. But we're obliged to check it out. Thank you for your cooperation. Please stay in touch. I don't want to restrict your freedom in any way, so I just ask you not to leave the city, especially if you are not involved. You have nothing to fear. After that, Tony said goodbye to Lucinda, and the woman left the station. She felt very bad. Liam was sitting in Jacob's office, who had called him in for more information after the results of his conversation with Lucinda had come back from Chicago. Liam had a nasty smile on his face. He felt that his plan had worked, and the police had found Lucinda. Now it was just a matter of finding her. We needed to get his ex-wife's phone number, or better yet, her address. We've spoken to your wife, Liam, and she claimed she had nothing to do with your money. And we have no reason not to trust her. Of course she has nothing to do with it, Liam replied mockingly. Did you think she'd just confess to you right away? I stole all the money from my husband, and now I'm living on my own while he's rotting away in his shitty job. Liam, I'm going to have to ask you to watch your language. Why don't we have a straight talk? I wonder what it's about. You never forgave your wife for not covering for you in the accident case. And now you want her to suffer too. Isn't that right? Jacob spent a long time trying to remember why this man looked so familiar. He checked the database, pulled up old cases, and it all came back to him. This was the man who'd caused a drunken accident, almost taken a young man's life, and then wanted to frame his wife. What a load of crap. Liam was outraged. I need her. I just need her to give me back what she stole from me. You see, Liam? The thing is, Jacob began to speak in a very quiet voice. You couldn't give us any proof that you had the money at all, and even less that your ex-wife could be involved in this case. Come on, there was no theft, was there? Can I at least see the answers to the questions about my money? Liam asked irritably. No, I can't give you that information. It is confidential and has no value to you. How dare you? Liam said with feigned emotion and immediately clutched his heart. Can I at least ask you for some water? He added quietly, mimicking a painful grimace. Liam realized that he was acting like a pussycat in a cheap soap opera, but he was still acting. Jacob grudgingly got up from his seat and walked out into the hallway to the water cooler. Even though the distance from the office to the water cooler wasn't very far, it was enough time for Liam to find the information he needed in his file on the desk. Among the other papers was a sheet of Lucinda's data. He quickly snapped a picture of them on his cell phone and slammed the folder shut, putting it back where it belonged. Jacob returned at the same second. Here you go. The man held out a glass of water. Thank you, Liam said, and drank the water in one gulp. You know, you're right. I was just trying to get back at my wife for my broken fate. You're the one who broke it. You don't have to continue your investigation. I don't care. Let him go to hell with the money. Jacob wanted to say something, but Liam had already left his office. The man walked outside and headed for his gatehouse with a triumphant look on his face. I told you you couldn't hide from me, Liam muttered under his breath. Wait for me to visit, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. After that, the man packed his modest belongings, took out the money he'd saved lately, and headed for the airport. He didn't plan to go back. There was nothing to keep him in this city anymore. He wanted to get to his ex-wife as soon as possible, so he wasn't going to waste time on the train, especially since the ticket price for these modes of transportation didn't differ much. Liam bought a ticket for the nearest flight, and in 3 hours he was already sitting on the plane, anticipating his meeting with Lucinda. It was a cold February evening outside. Lucinda was at home and was going to meet Steve, He had invited her to the theater for the opening night of a play. The man was supposed to pick Lucinda up in half an hour. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. "You're early," Lucinda said, opening the door. But when she saw Liam on the threshold, she was startled. "You? Were you expecting someone else, my dear?" Liam pushed Lucinda roughly into the apartment, then walked in and slammed the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" Lucinda asked breathlessly. "What's up?" Liam grinned. "I came to see my favorite wife. I see you're greeting me in full dress. How did you find me?" "Well, I told you I'd do it no matter how you hid, and I'm never one to throw words around. What do you want from me now?" You took everything away from me. After I got out of prison, I had to sell everything to pay off the debts my last partner left me in the graveyard of my business. After that, I had to live in a stinking gatehouse and sweep the damn yards every morning. All just to find you. I wanted to file a missing persons report on you at first, but they turned me down. So I figured out a way to get those stupid cops to come after you. Then it was just a matter of doing the little things, although I had to use my acting talent. The stubborn policeman didn't want to give me your details, but now, as you can see, I'm here with you. Liam, what do you want? We're not husband and wife for a long time. Lucinda tried to speak as calmly as possible. The woman was stalling for time because Steve should be here any minute. Lucinda hoped that he would be able to fix the problem. It's okay. We'll get remarried. You've left me with nowhere else to live, and no one will hire me. So I'm staying here on your full support. I've fed you, clothed you, taken you to resorts. Now, it's your turn. What are you talking about? I have a fiancé and he'll be here soon. Oh, you scared me, Liam said with a sneer. If he tries to come in here, I'll break every bone in his body. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Lucinda wanted to go to the door and open it, but Liam wouldn't let her. Don't you dare. I'm tired right now and I don't want to talk to anyone. Let her go. But the doorbell kept ringing. At the same time, Lucinda's cell phone rang. Answer it and tell her you're not going anywhere. And if you fart, I'll kill you where you stand. I've got nothing to lose. Do you understand? Lucinda nodded and hit the answer button. Steve, I'm sorry. I'm not feeling very well. I got a headache and I fell asleep. Look, can we postpone our trip to the theater? I'm really not feeling very well right now. Lucinda, I've been standing on your doorstep for about 10 minutes. Why don't you let me in? Steve, I'm sorry. I look terrible, and I don't want you to see me like this. Why don't we meet tomorrow? Is there anything you need? Medication? No, thanks. I love you. Love you too. I'll call you tomorrow morning. Steve disconnected the call and went to the elevator. Liam watched through the peephole. Good for you. You did the right thing. Lucinda obediently led her ex-husband to the table and began to warm his dinner. Liam smugly watched the woman. After a while, she put a plate of pasta and a glass of tomato juice in front of him. Don't you have anything to drink? No, Lucinda answered briefly. That's too bad. All right. Sit down and eat too. I'm sick of eating alone. I don't want to. The woman tried to object. Eat, I said, Liam shouted and pounded his fist on the table. Lucinda flinched in surprise and obediently placed the same plate in front of her. After dinner, Liam said he wanted to go to bed. Lucinda tried to linger in the kitchen to do the dishes, but the man wouldn't let her do so and told her to go with him to his room. Lucinda made the bed, and Liam unceremoniously laid down on it. Lie down, he commanded Lucinda. Could I at least take a shower? She asked timidly. That's the last thing I need. You're going to run away from me, and I'm too tired to keep you there. But after a short pause, Liam added, Go, though. Only take your clothes off here. Why? Lucinda asked in horror. I want to see if you gain any fat, Liam laughed. I want a slim wife. What are you talking about? Lucinda's eyes started to water. Don't cry, you idiot. It's like nothing ever happened between us. You know, I haven't even cheated on you once in all these years. You're the last woman I had sex with. so you can imagine how hungry I am for a woman's warmth." Lucinda was already sobbing at the top of her voice. She was scared and disgusted at the same time. And most importantly, she didn't know how to find a way out of this situation. "Shut up." Liam jumped up to Lucinda and slapped her painfully on the cheek. The woman immediately shut up and looked at him with eyes full of hatred. "Get undressed," Liam repeated his order in a commanding voice. Lucinda began to slowly remove her clothes, and Liam just watched this spectacle from the side. After 5 minutes, Lucinda was standing in front of him completely naked. The man slowly approached her, ran his hands over her breasts and thighs. Then he kissed her greedily. "Please, can I take a shower?" Lucinda moaned pitifully. "You have 3 minutes," Liam shouted. "And don't do anything stupid." The man went back to bed, and Lucinda ran to the bathroom, quietly opening the locks on the front door on the way. She herself didn't know how that would help her in this situation, but the woman hoped for a miracle. Lucinda stepped into the bathroom and closed the door on the latch. Time was not on her side. What to do now and how to get out of this situation, she had no idea. Words couldn't get through to Liam, at least not now. He hadn't wanted to listen to Lucinda before, even when they were still married. And now that the man thought she was to blame for all his problems, he wouldn't talk to her. Needing to run was the only way out. Quickly wrapping a towel around herself, Lucinda cautiously opened the door. It was dark, and Liam was nowhere to be seen. The woman tiptoed through the door and headed for the exit. Suddenly, she heard her ex-husband's mocking voice. "Are you going far?" Lucinda was stunned with horror. She realized that this was the end. She would not have a chance to escape again. "Liam, listen," Lucinda began to say, trying to appeal to her ex-husband's reason. "Don't do this, I beg you. This isn't who you are. Maybe I wasn't before you put me in jail, but I am now. Liam, it's not my fault you're in prison. You caused that accident. You drove drunk. I just told the police what happened. I didn't want to hurt you. Of course you didn't. If you hadn't, you wouldn't have run away like a rat. I asked you for help. I had a lot of money, and I could really get out of jail. But you wouldn't do it. You chose to run away from me and leave me alone with all this shit. You made your own choices, and now you're going to have to pay me back. I've given you everything for years. Now you're going to give it to me for a dime. Now enough words. Let's get back to business." Liam pulled the towel off Lucinda with a sharp movement. She tried to run, but the man grabbed her arm and squeezed her wrist painfully. "You're not going anywhere. Calm down, or it will only get worse." He dragged Lucinda into the room and pushed her onto the bed, then piled his body on top of her. "No, don't. Please let go." Lucinda screamed, but it only made Liam stronger. The man reveled in his newfound power over his ex-wife. He could see how scared she was, and he loved it. "Scream. It only turns me on." Lucinda had lost all hope and was running out of strength. She could no longer resist her ex-husband. The woman closed her eyes, resigned to her fate. Suddenly there was a thud, and Liam collapsed on top of Lucinda. It was hard to breathe for a few seconds, but someone moved her ex-husband off her and gently ran his hand over her cheek. "Lucinda, it's all right." Lucinda heard Steve's voice. Steve, how? How did you get in here? We have to call the police right now." "Lucinda, calm down. I've already done it. You get dressed and I'll disarm this guy before he comes to his senses." Lucinda quickly jumped out of bed and threw on the first robe she could find. 5 minutes later, the police arrived. They made a report of what had happened and took Liam to the station. Lucinda was still reeling from the nightmare she had been through. She and Steve were sitting in the kitchen, and he placed a glass of alcohol in front of Lucinda. "Drink this, it will help you calm down and relax." Lucinda obediently did so. The tension really began to subside, and she was able to regain some of her composure. "Steve, how did you know I needed help?" Lucinda asked. "I don't know. I felt it. At first I thought you were really sick and fast asleep, so you didn't hear my calls. I got out of the driveway. got in my car and drove home. But something kept bugging me. I mean, in all the time I've known you, you've never done that. You've had health problems, but you've always been happy to see me. And now you wouldn't even open the door, even though we talked this afternoon and everything was fine. And then I remembered your story about being called to the police on some case involving your ex-husband. I put two and two together and I had an unpleasant hunch. I didn't want to believe that anything bad could happen to you, but I decided to see if it was true. So I quickly got into my car and drove back to your place. I was about to press the bell, but suddenly I heard you screaming from behind the door. I quickly called the police, thinking about how I could stall until they arrived. Then I jerked the doorknob, and by some miracle it opened. I grabbed the first thing that came to hand and ran toward the sounds. And then you know the rest. Lucinda was again struck by a wave of horror at the realization of what could have happened to her and how Steve had miraculously been there at the very last moment. The man came close to her, hugged her tightly yet gently, and said softly, "I'll never leave you alone now. Too many things happened to you when I wasn't around. Perhaps now is not the right time. But still, Lucinda, do you want to be my wife?" Lucinda looked up at Steve with eyes full of tears. She had really gone through too much turmoil lately with her past life. Now she wanted a simple woman's happiness. "I do," Lucinda whispered back. The very next day, Steve took Lucinda to his house. There was no telling who else would want to infringe on her in light of recent events. A short time later, they were married. It was a simple wedding without any frills. The newlyweds did not organize a celebration, just a quiet dinner with their family. Now it seemed to Lucinda that here it was, a real happy family life, and for this it was not necessary to have Golden Mountain. As for Liam, he was being prosecuted for attempted rape. There was plenty of evidence, plus the testimony of Steve and neighbors who heard the screams, as well as characteristic marks on Lucinda's body. However, after a forensic psychiatric examination, it was found that the man had certain deviations. According to the court decision, he was sent to a psychiatric hospital for compulsory treatment, where he is likely to remain, if not for life, then for a very long period of time. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.